Hello, Tom Maguire. I have a book review and a half for you today. So this book is Be Useful, 7 Rules for Life by the great Arnold Schwarzenegger. What a legend. So before we get into the actual review, I just want to sort of set out how this review is going to go, just so you're kind of aware of where we're going, because I do tend to go on for a bit of a tangent sometimes. This channel is about the books that I read, the books that I listen to, but I also try to put a personal development bent on things. I want to try and get across the things I've learned from books, how books have kind of helped me and shaped me over the years. And I want to leave these reviews to my kids so that they can learn from the things that I've learned from and maybe decide to read the same books if they feel interested as well. Also, as I always say, to laugh at their old dad trying to be a YouTuber as well. So don't take myself too seriously. But this is a really good book. And like I say, I'm just going to set out where we're going to go. So I will at some point be telling you about a homeless man and a 16-year-old girl who are both very, very inspiring. So we'll come to that. I also want to talk to you about the importance of shoveling shit and why that's so important to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it's also something that's important to me as well. So it's something that I kind of relate to him quite nicely with. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what I would have liked to have heard more of from Arnold in this book. But I think that's going to lead me on to something quite important as well when it comes to personal development, which will be in the positive for him as well. So those are things I want to cover. Other than that, I'm just going to tell you how good the book is, why I think it's good. I'm going to give you some of the ideas from the book. So there will be kind of spoilers, I suppose, to some degree. So if you don't want that, then fair enough. But I've told you. So, you know, I'm not really going to tell you exactly what he says in the book, but I'm going to give you some of the lessons as I see them and kind of how I've benefited from that. I don't think Arnold really needs much introduction. I could go over who he is, but I think most of you will know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is by now, or have some idea. If not, there's always Google, isn't there? You'll find plenty about the man. I discovered him when I was about 10 years old. I knew of him before then because I'd seen films with him in and, you know, kind of seen clips with him and things like that. You could hardly miss him. But I sort of discovered, I suppose, taking my own fitness routine seriously when I was about 10 years old. Always played sport as a kid through primary school with my brother, football mainly, tennis as well. But I started running on the road with my dad when I was about 10 years old. He used to take us out and we'd run behind him and just feel absolutely exhausted trying to keep up with him until the day came that we were fitter than him, and then we kind of went off on our own. But I then decided that I didn't just want to do running, I wanted to lift weights. It was just something that appealed to me. I just liked the idea of getting bigger and stronger and fitter. So my dad and my granddad bought me a set of weights once for Christmas. I think I must have been about 10 or 11 years old. Set it up in my bedroom. Proceeded for the next however many months and years to lift things probably quite badly in the wrong way, which probably caused me all sorts of injuries now down the line. But, you know, it got me off to a good start. I was keen, loved it. So I used to read books with Arnold on fitness and weight training. Always found him very inspiring. I think he's really funny. Love watching him in the films and stuff. So that's kind of my take on Arnold. I'm sure most of you will like him. Some of you may not. I tend to find most people like him for one reason or another. I think he's quite entertaining. One of the chapters I found really interesting in this book, it's called Shift Gears. And Arnold talks about how he cried himself through the whole night after he lost a bodybuilding competition to someone called Frank Zane. And I thought that was really good to hear him talk about being that vulnerable, to talk about the fact that he was so upset to lose. But he basically kind of comes back and says, you know, that's okay. You know, we all lose, but actually I hated it and it taught me something and I learned from him. And he proceeded then to train with Frank Zane, take loads of tips from him as well, who, to Frank's credit, was more than happy to help him, gave him all these tips, and then Arnie turned around and never lost to him again. So that was nice. That was quite warming to think there's that spirit in bodybuilding, and there was at least back then, where people shared and they wanted to improve the sport together. And obviously Arnold was the sort of figurehead really for developing bodybuilding in America and making it as big as it became. I particularly liked what he said about when he had his heart operation. He went to doctors, he knew there was a chance that things could go wrong. Someone fairly recently, quite famous before him, had gone wrong in the same hospital, so he went in with an open mind. And people sort of said to him, oh, you know, wouldn't you sue if things had gone wrong, etc., etc. And he basically says, who on earth is that going to benefit? You know, the doctors are doing their best, nothing's guaranteed. Who's going to benefit other than the lawyers if I start suing people? And I thought that was a really important point, because so many people get carried away with their rights and taking something for nothing and this kind of suing, blaming culture. And no one really realises, you know, they see it in films, they think it's glamorous, they think it's clever. They don't really realise the only people who actually benefit are the lawyers, the ones who just charge for absolutely everything. And it's just a bit of a sad state of affairs, because it was nice to hear him say that. I know some people will be thinking, well, it's Arnold, he's got enough money, he doesn't need to worry about that sort of thing. But it's the attitude, isn't it, and the principle. He doesn't moan about the fact that his dad used to occasionally hit them as kids. In fact, he says that he loved his dad. He learned a lot from him. His dad would always say to him, be useful, Arnold, and that's where the title of this book came from. I personally think the title of this book has also been influenced by Jordan Peterson, and you may say I'm always talking about Jordan Peterson, but I think he is that influential at the minute, particularly when it comes to personal development, particularly when it comes to this sort of subject of self-help. I would find it difficult to believe that Arnie hadn't come across him and was influenced by him, to be honest. So I do think he probably has been, and that's a good thing. Nothing wrong with that at all. Arnold says a lot throughout the book that he's not a self-made man. There's no such thing as being self-made, because you have to rely on other people to a certain extent. You get help from other people. He says how he had help for this book, to put this book together, editing it, improving it. He had help all the way through his bodybuilding career with Joe Vida. All the other professionals who pushed him on, who battled against him. James Cameron, the director, who directed him in The Terminator, went on to do Titanic, Avatar. All these hugely successful people, significant people that he's worked with, who have hugely helped him. I think it's really good that he acknowledges that he didn't just do that on his own. He doesn't see himself as a self-made man. I like that, because I agree with that. You hear people saying, oh, I'm self-made. So many people might be considered to be privileged and given an advantage, and I just think so many of us in the West are. You know, if you're born with a decent roof over your head and heating and electricity, mobile phones, then of course you're privileged compared to a large percentage of the rest of the population of the world. But that doesn't mean you can't do things for yourself. You may never be completely and utterly self-made. You do need to take help from other people. But I think the point that Arnold makes there is really significant. We do need to work in conjunction with others to help each other. Help someone and they help you back to a certain degree. He talks about the importance of curiosity and being humble, and he says that he's more like his character Julius in Twins than he would be any of the kind of soldier, hard-ass characters that he's played in kind of Predator or Commando or anything like that. He's much more a gentle kind of spirit who just wants to know, who's really interested in things, and maybe sometimes can be a bit naive, but wants to learn, wants to discover. And he talks about that particularly in terms of when he was governor of California. He learned all these different things he'd never had any kind of experience of before. I said I was going to mention the things that I would like to have heard more of. I would have liked to have heard more of his regret about his kind of affair that he had in the 90s. I've heard him talk before about this, and talk about how he feels terrible that he'd let his family down, that he'd caused problems, and it was a genuine regret for him. And I think that's really powerful. He mentions that he hit rock bottom around that time in this book, but it is kind of just a very short bit. And I think for me, although it's a self-help book, and you could argue no one needs to hear the negative stuff, I think the negative stuff is really important. I think for someone as big and successful as Arnie, to be able to kind of turn around and say, yes, I made a massive mistake, but actually I haven't let it stop me. It's kind of shaped me potentially in some ways for the better from now on. I think that's hugely significant, because we're all human. I also like to, talking about that, I also like to bring up the saying that Jordan Peterson has mentioned before, talking about people like Tiger Woods. We tend to get quite judgmental, don't we, of celebrities and people who have affairs, and we sort of, look down on those and think, oh, how terrible of them. And I'm not defending it, of course, because I tend to feel like that as well about it. But it's simple, isn't it? Or it's easy, isn't it, when you haven't got a coach load of Swedish bikini models waiting for you, screaming for you at the end of the 18th hole. In other words, when you're that famous and that popular, that power is huge. It's really significant. And I'm sure unless you've experienced it, you can't really understand it. So it's very easy for us to judge, isn't it? People like Arnold, people like Tiger Woods, who find themselves in those situations doing regrettable things. Actually, if you had their power, their influence, their money, you may not be quite so angelic yourself. But I just think that's something worth thinking about. I think that's just wisdom, isn't it? But interesting. So I would have liked to hear him talk a bit more about that. I also said I was going to talk about a homeless man and a 16-year-old girl who give a lot back. I don't know a hell of a lot about these, but they were mentioned in the book by Arnold. There's a guy called, I think he's called Todd Owen, but I couldn't quite tell because Arnie's legendary accent, I couldn't quite tell. You'd need to actually look at the book or maybe look this up. But he was a homeless man in West LA who went around with nothing more than a shopping cart or a shopping trolley, for those of us in England, picking up litter, scrubbing graffiti, just doing all sorts of helpful things, which is brilliant. And he's just making the point that you don't have to have anything to give back and to be useful. He talks about a 16-year-old girl from Tucson, Arizona, called Lily Messing. Look her up online. There is a fair bit there online about her. She's won all sorts of awards for, I think she set up some kind of a charity helping people. She sounds like she's really interesting. I'm going to be looking her up myself as well. So she's called Lily Messing from Tucson, Arizona. So yeah, fantastic book. Highly recommend it. It's read by Arnie if you listen to the audiobook as well. I've got a few more books I'm going to review very soon. I've recently read Taxotopia by the Rebel Accountant, which is fairly infuriating but funny when you realise where your taxes are going and how bent the system is. Ronald Reagan, or it might be just called Reagan actually, by Brett Harper. That's very good. I'll be reviewing that at some point. Promise Me Dad by Joe Biden. And You May Never See Us Again by Jane Martinson, which is one that I'm about to listen to, which I'm quite excited about. I'm also reading Blood Meridian at the minute as well by Cormac McCarthy, which is fantastic. It's quite a difficult read, but I will probably review that at some point. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Please keep liking and subscribing. It's always appreciated. Speak soon. Cheers. So the whole shoveling shit thing particularly interests me because Arnold has done a couple of videos on YouTube recently where he's been promoting his book and he's got his pets. I think he's got pigs or goats or something, or I think he's got quite a few. He's got like a miniature donkey or something. And he basically says that he's there shoveling shit regularly and it's just something you have to do. It's just life. And it just makes me laugh because I have to do that all the time. We've got 2 dogs. I mean, it's a little bit different having the number of pets that he's got. But they literally cover our garden on a daily basis. And I'm just always joking that I'm constantly picking up shit. I'm either doing that or I'm changing my boy's nappy. And it just seems to be constant shit all the time. But you know what? I wouldn't change it for the world. And I think Arnie would probably appreciate that as well. I think that's kind of what he says as well. You get to a point in your life, you know, I'm not 75 like Arnold is, I'm 42, but I've got to a point where as much as work and fitness and all of that is really important to me, I'm never happier than when I'm just kind of being useful as a dad, picking up crap, changing nappies, being there, being useful. And yeah, I think it's great personally. I still have other dreams and ambitions going on that I'm always working on, but that kind of gives me real contentment. And that was something that I kind of really related to this book. So yeah, I just wanted to put that bit in.